Hello Indie Warriors, and welcome to I Dream of Indie Games. My name is Old Gamer Joe, and today we are taking a very special look at Guild Saga Vanished Worlds. This is a tactical strategy RPG that is coming to us from Ocelot, releasing into early access on October 10th. Before we get into all of the details and I share my overall thoughts on what I've played so far, a very special thank you to Ocelot for sponsoring this video and supporting independent content here at I Dream of Indie Games. Another shout out to Vicarious PR for connecting us with Ocelot. We really appreciate it and are excited to share this game with our audience. Obviously, y'all have known us long enough to understand that this sponsorship won't have any bearing on my opinion as far as what I've played thus far, but as always, we wanted to be transparent with you. Alright then, as I mentioned, Guild Saga Vanished Worlds is a tactical RPG that harkens back to classic games of its genre. There's a 99.9% chance that you're going to find something to like about this title if you enjoyed many of the late 90s, early 2000s strategy RPGs. But before I get into the nitty-gritty of the story and gameplay, let's get the obvious out of the way. If you're watching and not just listening to this video, then you can see for yourself just how beautiful this game looks. The pixel art utilized for this release feels classic in every sense of the word, and I'm absolutely here for it. The world is really vibrant and rich with color based off of what I've played. It feels lived in, plenty of people walking around, exceptional enemy designs, backdrops, and high-definition portrait art presented during conversations in an anime style. Throughout those 3 hours I spent playing, I traversed a variety of scenes, including sandy beaches, bustling towns, and even rainy jungles. The attention to detail given to the visuals is really impressive here, whether it's rain falling from the sky or shadows being cast from trees. There's lots of great lighting used throughout the game. The menu designs, they're a little lacking in comparison to everything else, but overall, it's a really great looking game. Now that's obvious, I could gush over the graphics all day, but there's much more to this title than a pretty face, and as we know, looks aren't everything. Let's get into the narrative because there's plenty to be discussed there. You are a member of the Heroes Guild, tasked with protecting the lands from evil forces. That sounds pretty generic, right? And maybe it is to a degree, but the writing throughout this game is surprisingly well done from what I've seen, and gives you plenty of reasons to unravel its mysteries. That said, there is a ton of dialogue to click through, so if you don't like reading, and reading often, this might not be the game for you. You'll also be presented with various dialogue choices throughout gameplay, some of which can have a positive or negative impact on you. So for example, you might get a treasure from someone if you say the right thing, or they might get pissed off at you if you say the wrong thing. Starting out, players will create and name a lead character. You can choose between a variety of different attributes, including appearance, backstory, gender, and talents. It's not the most robust character creator that I've come across, but there's plenty of options to build a hero to your liking. You begin the game out at sea, heading towards the island of Mistshade. Much of your tale is told through a narrator who keeps the narrative moving at a really brisk pace. You'll need to be paying attention as the story tends to jump around a bit. Still, the dialogue is really well written, and I'm really curious how the characters are going to, over time, interact with each other, because there's already been some interesting build-up in the story as a whole. There's plenty of violence here, political drama, and mystical intrigue that's kept me invested up to this point. So, really great retro visuals, a promising story up to this point, and now I want to talk a little bit about the gameplay. It's worth noting the build we received did not include controller support. However, the developer has stated that controllers should be usable in the final build of the game. Now, I'm not Mr. Mouse Keyboard by any means, I prefer controller, but I was able to adapt to my less than preferred method of playing pretty quickly. Characters are moved by clicking a destination on the screen. When in combat, you'll have limited movement, much like other strategy games. Guild Saga Vanished Worlds mixes its exploration and combat pretty seamlessly. Most battles that I came across were scripted and not random. Exploration involves talking to townsfolk, interacting with and looting objects, and then fast traveling via a world map. One feature that I thought was kind of cool was the ability to break up your party and send them in different directions. So say you wanted to sneak around your enemies with one party and leave your other party in the front, well, that's something you could potentially do in this game. This might lead to some really cool elements of strategy the further you get in. Combat, as you would imagine, is going to be a bit deeper than the exploration. Each character comes equipped with a variety of attacks and spells. Players decide whether they want to strike from a distance or get in close to deal out damage in traditional tactical fashion. It's a pretty standard grid-based battle system that allows players to take their time and think about each move. You'll have a set amount of movement and attack points, and you'll need to decide your next move accordingly. Many of the spells that were at my disposal were really fun to use, including the ability to summon a fire blob, and there was also some lightning attacks that I really enjoyed that could strike enemies from quite far away. With the game having a few different difficulty options, including a more lax story mode, it feels fairly accessible, even for newcomers to the genre, to a degree, because I will say the tutorials could still use a bit of work. While prompts which appear randomly throughout gameplay will clue you in on certain gameplay elements, such as the ability to highlight interactable objects, there were a few times where I was left to my own devices as to figuring things out. As you hopefully win battles, you'll predictably level up, but there are many different ways to build out your characters. Hardcore strategy fans will appreciate the many different build types that can potentially be created. The game is promising 5 races in total, with a massive amount of different skills at your disposal. I imagine we're going to see a lot of unique character builds when the game launches, and I'm excited to see other players' powerful combinations. One issue I did encounter in combat was that it could sometimes be a little hard to tell whether I was lined up against an enemy correctly, so perhaps a bit of work could still be done to ensure your character is standing in the correct position to strike. That was a little bit frustrating. Alright, now I've talked a bunch about the game already, and I haven't even touched on the soundtrack yet. Well, it's very good, and it has this unique vibe to it with wonderful orchestration. There's low brooding synths at times. There's bells, hard-hitting drums that have sort of a military vibe to them. The soundtrack mixes quite a few different instruments. There's flutes, hand drums. It's pretty eclectic. I didn't come across any voice acting in the game so far, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. We've seen how that can potentially go in other games. From what I can tell, Ocelot looks to be making a massive adventure, and I've already gotten a sense for just how big the game will be. There's plenty of exploration and combat to sink your teeth into, and I haven't even gotten into the crazy amount of side quests that I encountered just in these 3 hours. Items that can be crafted, there's towns that are large enough to have their own individual maps. This is one of the more ambitious strategy RPGs that I've seen from an indie studio, without question. I would expect a very large game and plenty of hours of gameplay based off of what I've seen so far. Alright, I have greatly enjoyed my time with Guild Saga Vanished Worlds. It's a deep strategy game that feels very polished considering it's going to be an early access release initially. Sure, there is still some tweaking to be done here or there in the menu designs. Overall, my complaints are pretty few and far between. If you love this genre, I think you're going to be really happy with what Ocelot has created, even in early access. Now, we're going to have a link to the game in the description box below once again, and I recommend tossing this one on your wish list if it's caught your interest today and you love strategy RPGs. Once again, a very special thank you to Ocelot for sponsoring this video. Let us know in the comments below. Will you be checking out Guild Saga Vanished Worlds? Voice to the voiceless, everyone. I'll see you on the channel for even more indie gaming coverage here at I Dream of Indie Games.